So welcome to Breakthrough. My name is Randy Hicks. I'm the president and CEO of the Georgia Center for Opportunity, your host for today. The Georgia Center for Opportunity, if I won't go into some long explanation, but I'll say it this way. Our work revolves around what might be called the defining American idea. The idea that everyone should have an opportunity to achieve a better life, regardless of their circumstances, regardless of their race, regardless of the circumstances of one's birth or past mistakes. It doesn't matter. We believe everyone should have an opportunity to achieve a better life. We work at two levels. We work at the policy level and we work at the community level. In both places, what we're attempting to do is remove the barriers that keep people from achieving that better life. So we're here for an education forum, so it's not hard for you to imagine why education would matter to us. Someone who does not have access to quality education is facing a serious barrier to success. Now, our work overall revolves around three issues: education, employment, and family formation. Why those three issues? Well, that's called the success sequence. And it's research that comes out of the Brookings Institution based in Washington, D.C., which shows that of all Americans who have at least graduated from high school, found steady employment, and waited till they were at least 21 to marry and have kids, only 2% are living in poverty today. Of those who've gotten those three things wrong, 75% are living in poverty today. So there is a dramatic difference. Well, you'll notice the first of those three things was education. You get education wrong, you're building barriers to the employment that puts you in a place not only to be self-sufficient, but perhaps to one day form and sustain a healthy family and family life. So tonight is about education. We did a breakthrough event a few months ago. It was on employment, and it was particularly centered around the criminal justice system and people coming out of the criminal justice system and needing work. Tonight is about education. The thing that we know, and everybody in this room knows this, the past couple years has heightened the awareness that there are definitely haves and have-nots when it comes to education. And not only that, it's made people aware that at times the system is not as responsive as it should or needs to be. What we need every child to be able to do in this state is have access to the kind of education that will allow them to succeed. So again, that's what tonight's all about. I want to thank you all for being here. I think you're going to enjoy the program. You're going to hear from some excellent speakers, some lawmakers, some school leaders who deal with the kinds of issues that are confronting so many parents and children when it comes to education. So what I want to do right now is introduce two of my colleagues, Jamie Lord, who does fantastic work in government affairs down at the Capitol, and Buzz Brockway. Buzz is our Vice President of Public Policy. Buzz, you may know, many of you may know, actually served in the legislature for 8 years. A couple years ago, he ran for Secretary of State, and we're so glad he lost, and apparently so is he, because he's on our staff and he wasn't hounded by some of the occurrences of the past year or so. So,
know me in a different context.
Yes, we would
I'd
know
be
you even
famous
better.
a different way.
That's right. So, Buzz and Jamie, take it away.
Yep. Thanks, Randy. Jinx.
I know that this space is called the Abbey, which reminds people of church, but you do not have to sit in the back. I encourage people to kind of come forward, if you will, if you would like.
That's some leadership there, Senator Miller. Moving up.
There we go. I promise Buzz and I are going to give you a quick overview of some polling and talk a little bit about some of the data that shows what parents want, how they're thinking about education at this time. And then we will have a networking and beer break right after we speak. So you don't have to sit near the bar. You can come up. We will give you a minute to go back and get food and drinks after we chat before we get into our first panel. So anyway, anybody that's still standing, come on, feel free to come up. What Buzz and I want to talk to you about today in the space of education is really just some historical trends, and especially in the last year, some data about what it is that parents want. And this may show poor taste in music, I'm not sure, but the Kinks album, Give the People what they want. Copan, we can go from there. All right, so one thing I want to say is that we've been doing polling in the state of Georgia, and some of our allies have been doing it nationally. I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say for decades on the concept of school choice. And what exactly people mean by that has evolved over time. It kind of started with vouchers was the only option. We now have tax credit scholarship programs, education savings accounts, public charter schools. Home and virtual schools are different and more popular than they've ever been in the past. So there's just a wide variety of options when we talk about school choice, but it's always been popular. This is a national survey. It's always been popular here in Georgia, but I want to talk about some national data first. And this is just showing sort of historical trends. This Beck research, Debbie Beck is a well-known Democratic pollster. So I know that sometimes people look at the issue of school choice and say, oh, that's a Republican idea. We can't trust any data that Republicans put out. So the reason I'm highlighting Debbie's polling is specifically because she is a Democratic pollster and shows, consistent, above 65, well, except for 2018, not sure what happened that year, nationally on the idea of school choice.
Yeah, and I think, adding to that, we have real live data that backs this up. If you remember back in 2012, I guess it was, when Georgia had a charter school amendment, charter schools, of course, being an element of choice, it passed. My PTA was all over me saying, you can't do this, it's terrible, you can't do this. It passed overwhelmingly in my district. In Democratic counties, you take like Clayton County, it passed against the opposition of a number of Democratic legislators. The voters wanted it. So I think that polling is one thing, then you have real world data that shows you the exact same thing.
So one thing we'll highlight on, because there's no way to talk about trends in what parents want in education without mentioning the impact of the pandemic. This is data just from 2020, so a little bit old really for us now. The jump from just April to August of 2020 in the attitudes that people had about the concept of school choice. Now, this was a poll done by Real Clear Opinion Research, and one of their pollsters actually does some polling for Joe Biden. So again, this is not some right-leaning tilt to this data, but total support, was great. But you can see a basically 10-point jump from public school parents mid-pandemic saying, hey, we want other options. And that could be any number of reasons. There might be people that disagreed with school closures. There might be people that disagreed with masks. There might be people that said, hey, my school's not safe enough, and I don't feel like I can show up without risking my family's health. So wherever you are on the spectrum of what the school board or the school chose to do about opening, about education, about virtual school, about masks, et cetera, there were people who felt like they needed something else, and the data bears that out. Even millennials get this one right, so there's some hope for the future.
Hope for the future.
There you go. Now we're back to Beck research, Debbie Beck again, so that we can get into 2021 data. So you kind of saw her historical data, but this was a survey done in January of 2021 that shows, again, just really consistent support. This is the support line. These are the we don't know or we oppose it line, and you can see just the demographics there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you see it's strong in every community. Every community feels pretty much the same way about this.
So that was January of 2021. Let's fast forward to July, which is some of the more recent national polling data. This was Real Clear Politics again, or I said July, I meant June. So they did a national survey, and a majority supported school choice, 74% versus 16% opposed, while 10% were just unsure largely of what that meant. And Copan, we can go forward. And this kind of breaks down the demographics of that Real Clear Politics survey from June of 2021. So
Yeah.
you can see, can we go back one, Coupon, real quick? So this shows you the question that was asked. Generally speaking, would you say you support or oppose the concept of school choice? And then it explains what that means. It gives parents the right to use tax dollars designated for their child's education to send their child to the public or private school which best serves their needs. Sometimes it's beyond even just public versus private, as we've just talked about. Many families have a real world experience with virtual and homeschool, whether they intended to or not over the last 2 years. So this is, that could be broadened, I think, to explain all the other options that exist. But even with that question, this is where we are.
Yeah, and I think, there's the old saying, there's lies, darn lies, and statistics. It's a family event, so I won't say what it really say. But I think that's why it's helpful to see what the question is. What did they ask? And you can see this is not attempting to manipulate anybody's opinion one way or the other. This is very straightforward. This is what a choice program would do, and this is how it would operate. And you see this overwhelming support. And look, as divided as our country is right now, we're fighting about everything. When you see issues that are 69, 70, 73, 76% support, you know the American people are behind it.
And this is interesting because we can look at the demographics of, where people live or their, race and ethnicity, but this is our party ID, right? So something that is 70% supported by Democrats, 83 Republican, 69 independents, what that says really to lawmakers, to politicians is this is a winner for you no matter what. You need Republicans to vote for you in a primary, winner. Yeah. You need Democrats to vote for you in a primary, winner. You need to pull over some independents to your side in a statewide race or in a local race, still a winner. Yeah. And so this is not something that people need to be afraid of. It is something that parents in particular, but voters even more generally, support the idea of parents having a voice and a choice in their child's education.
Yep.
So what I kind of want to highlight, we saw the January Debbie Beck poll and then the June Real Clear Politics poll, and so it's a little bit not exactly apples to apples, but we just kind of want to take a look at just in the span of that year, and really the Real Clear Politics poll that I showed you guys from 2020 and then the recent one from 2021. I mean, there's basically a 10-point increase just in a 1-year time span of support for this issue. So I think what it shows is that there's just momentum building. There's also just an understanding that parents have that they didn't have, and voters, that they didn't have before. I think most people for a long time have been kind of just trucking along, like my school's good, my system's fine, I'm oblivious perhaps, but no problems. And then all of a sudden, parents through Zoom have a window into what's happening in their classroom or not. A lot of families were juggling, trying to figure out work while their kids were at home during virtual school. And what has always been true is that people wanted choice. I think what has highlighted that fact is that we've all sort of figured out that there are times and places where we just kind of have to have it to be able to make it work for families or to make it work because of something that's going on in our society.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we can talk more about this as we go on here, but we all know that the pandemic has disrupted pretty much every area of our life. And I think now we're seeing that in education. It's disrupting the entire education sector. And it's got people thinking, we see this, people talk about the Great Resignation. People are not satisfied with their jobs. They're looking for different jobs. And now we're seeing that in education. And it's incumbent then upon leaders, and it's incumbent upon people in our school systems, how they're going to respond to that. Well, I think we're seeing that what the public wants is they want options and they want choices.
Yeah, one of the things I saw in another recent national poll, and there's so much stuff that we could talk about up here. Buzz and I are only allotted a short amount of time because we have much more important people to hear from than the two of us. But I think one of the things we've even seen is that about 70% of parents who have their kids in public school, if given the option and the resources, would make a different choice. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's astounding to me. That's national data. And so, I mean, that's a different place than we would have been. Yes. As popular as school choice has always been nationally and especially in the state of Georgia, it's on steroids right now, quite frankly.
And I think one thing is, Jamie, you talked, we've been polling, you and I have been looking at these sorts of polls for years, and then it breaks down in where is it on people's list of top 10 issues. Education, of course, is always near the top, but I think now it's education and education choice is right there. I mean, it's jobs and it's education. And that's what people are, you elected officials, I'm sure that's the kind of stuff you're hearing. We need jobs, and what are you guys going to do to make sure my kid gets a good education? And it's gone from just one issue to being one of the issues.
Yeah.
And that's a big change since
An
the
actual
pandemic happened.
motivating issue for voters as
Yeah.
opposed to just something they theoretically care about in a different way. I think, the economy and inflation will probably always be at the top, but this is kind of nestling right in there in the top three. So it would be wise, I think, for elected officials of either party to figure out how to take this issue on and serve the people in their communities. And a lot of legislators have done that.
Yes.
So we don't have time to go into all of the different bills and all the different states that have done things, but just in the last year, 18 states have passed 7 new school choice programs, like enacted something they didn't have before. And then 12 existing school choice programs have been expanded, including one in Georgia that we were able to achieve legislatively last year. You'll hear more about that in our, I would say next panel, except we're not a panel, in our first panel that comes after
Yes.
the beer break that I promised
And I think
you
it's
when we get
important.
up.
Some of these were small changes, some of them were big. I think the most dramatic one was the state of West Virginia created a new program that 90% of all the kids in the state are eligible for. So it's not just, okay, here's a few crumbs. It's serious reform.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I wanted to just bring up, because we do have, community leaders in the room, we have elected officials in the room, we might have people who want to be elected officials someday in the room. I think sometimes there has been a fear-based response among legislators, not just in the state, but elsewhere, that this thing is controversial. If we, start talking about giving parents options, then we meet with some resistance from the education establishment. The AJC says nasty things about us, and so we got to figure out how to communicate about this a little bit better and really help people feel comfortable talking to their constituents or, for those that need to talk to the whole state, to do that as well. And so there's been a lot of work done in the last couple of years, both with polling and focus groups and a lot of message testing, and I won't get into all of the ways that this data came. But there are some ways to talk about these issues that really resonate with parents. And so I just kind of wanted to share that, for those of you that are communicators. And one of the big things is, I know we talk a lot in the COVID space about getting back to normal, whatever that looks like. And everybody kind of feels differently about what that means, be it in your businesses or certainly in education. But most parents don't just want to go back to the way things were. Yep. They kind of recognize now that, hey, it's 2022. We've been doing the same things a long time. It's time for something innovative. It's time for new ways of thinking about education. And so one of the things that resonates mostly with parents is rethink it. Yeah. Think outside the box. They don't want to do anything terribly risky to their kid, but they don't just want to go back to the status quo that was before either. Yeah. So a couple of just really key communication points is it's time to put students ahead of systems. Even schools, even districts. Yeah. It's not about the building, it's about the child. Student-focused, personalized learning is the way forward. So no more failing approaches from the outdated past. And I think that is what most parents have had their eyes open to through the pandemic, is just, there's some outdated stuff, and it's time we move forward and kind of get current with things.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing that in choices that parents are already making. The number of families who have decided to homeschool their kid has more than doubled in the state of Georgia, and that's true across the nation too. The number of African American parents who have chosen to homeschool has risen even higher, is more than doubled. So they're making that, and I think that's what they're saying. Okay, I've experienced a measure of choice here, and okay, there's some things that I can do right now. And of course, we want to help those parents as they make those choices. But I think that's hitting on that last thing. No more failing approaches. No more. This is a modern economy. We have to prepare our kids for this modern economy, and we're going to take the initiative ourselves and make it happen.
The other message is that we recognize that COVID set our students back. They feel it. The parents feel it. Those of you that are fielding phone calls from parents feel it. And elected officials and advocates for change feel it too. And because of COVID, we now have this real opportunity and a responsibility to launch these students forward. Mm-hmm. Let's not waste it. Let's make real change for real students in the real world. I mean, that is just key, I think, as we move forward. And there have been some really interesting case studies throughout the years pre-COVID. about terrible things, natural disasters in Louisiana, for instance, that just decimated, like even physically, their school system. Like buildings are gone, people are displaced. How do we figure out how to build back in a different way? Build back better? Is it too soon for the no?
It's a great concept. Yeah.
How do we build back in a different way instead of just redoing what we already had?
Yeah.
And there have been some really interesting case studies and examples of student performance being just drastically improved because a state was sort of forced, in this case our country, is forced to rethink the way we provide our students' education.
Yeah, and I think there's been study after study, even looking at what's going on now. Where do kids stand right now? The Georgia Department of Audits just took a look at it and determined that the average student is 4 to 6 months behind right now. That's the average student. That means that there's some that are doing okay. That means there are others who are doing a lot worse than that between that 4 to 6 months. So, that's something I don't hear. We have a number of candidates running for state school superintendent, for example. I haven't heard anybody talking about that. What's the plan to address that? And so I think that, parents want to hear that. Parents want to know. That may be more than all the other things we're debating. That may be the most important thing that parents want to know.
Which kind of brings us to the next messaging point. There's been so much money sent down from the federal government and even enacted in the state budget passed by the legislatures and the governor to address education, pandemic education, and education generally. But the state of Georgia got something, to the tune of about $6 billion to try to help solve these problems. But I think at the end of the day, the thing that resonates with families is not how much did you spend, it's about how effectively did you spend it? What accountability is there? To Buzz's point, have you addressed the actual needs of families, or is this becoming the slush fund for the system to do their pet projects or put money back in reserves? And it's fine to give bonuses to teachers and pay raises and keep your administrators happy. I'm not opposed to any of that as a daughter of a lifelong public educator. We need to do those things. Right. But it's not the only thing, and we kind of have to be able to draw a direct line between the things that are spent, the money that is used, and what the student outcomes are. And I think many families just don't feel that. They also know that they've taken a hit. Many of them had to work from home, had to manage their kids' education, had to figure it out, and they haven't received direct support in that moment or even after the fact to make a different choice if they want to. And so there's a little bit of resentment among some families that the system's getting a ton of support, but what about me? What about our family?
Yeah, what about my kid? Yeah. And I think, we just have a couple minutes left here, but I think, if I could step on my soapbox for a minute, we're getting all this money from the federal government. Our state revenue is increasing. I mean, Governor Kemp is ready to dole out some dough back to the citizens, which may all be a wonderful program. But we've got this extra money coming down from the feds over the next 3 or 4 years. Where is the massive, why don't we set as a state, here is our goal. By the end of that time, we know that there were problems in education before. We know there were kids that were behind before. The pandemic has exacerbated that. At the end of that 3 years, we ought to set a state goal to say that there's not going to be one kid behind anywhere in the state of Georgia by the time that extra federal money rolls out. And I think we got some politicians in the room. The candidate who expresses that kind of viewpoint and comes out with that kind of plan, folks are going to love it. And the parents of this state are going to cheer that, and they're going to support that, and they want to see that happen. But that should be our state goal.
And to your point, Buzz, I think
I'm not running for anything.
Nor am I, for a lot of reasons. But I think to your point, Buzz, I think we've seen examples even in recent election cycles, and this was true pre-COVID, pre-pandemic. I could give you just case study after case study of statewide elections, but even local House and Senate races of folks unseating incumbents with this message, folks winning a district that is geographically doesn't make any sense, a Democrat winning a Republican district or vice versa, on this message, because it really is empowering to families to know that they have a choice, whether they exercise it or not. The fact that they have the choice means that they have a stronger voice. It means the school board has to take them more seriously. It means that they're invested in their students' education, even if they stay put. but they at least feel like they know they could do something if they had to, and they feel grateful for that opportunity. And you can look at even recent examples of folks like, the Glenn Youngkin win in Virginia. We don't have time, but I could give you some sort of specifics in our state and others of folks who've, really embraced this message and seen it ultimately help them be victorious.
And I think the flip side of that, we're not aware of a candidate who stood for school choice who was defeated because of that issue, right? So it's a winning issue. It's also not a losing issue. So the threats that politicians may get don't ring true.
So I think our message at the end of the day, to those of you that are not elected officials and have no desire, like Buzz already did his time. I'd never want to do it. I'm glad others are willing to serve. But for those of us advocates and policymakers, we have our role. But certainly elected officials of either party, it's up for grabs. I think the party that decides to figure out how to give real solutions to real kids and families, they're going to see a benefit from that. And individual candidates that do that will do the same. And there's nothing but empirical evidence to that fact, not only recently, but really for decades.